Wasn't I just an absolute little stinker, cutting the chapter off halfway through? But don't worry, I'll continue, and until we get to the 3 dots to signify the end of a part in the chapter, we'll call it that, I'll do my best not to cut it off again. One nurse had the presence of mind to stop and point it on. "Excuse me, what are you—" "He's with me," Aunt said curtly. "Keep up the good work, miss." And then they were already past the nurse and accelerating. They slipped into an elevator too filled with anxious humanity for An and Yusuke to even stand out. An stared down at her clipboard and flipped through the papers as they ascended. Yusuke glimpsed several of the pages. They appeared to be notes from Miss Usame's math class. The elevator dinged open, and they slipped back out and into the circulation of staff through the halls. Left, right, right again, now in the ICU where the nurse's conversation was more frantic than ever. The stress in the atmosphere was almost cloying. Yusuke was faintly acquainted with this sort of tension, standing among other hopefuls around their art exhibits, where every sideways glance weighed heavy with judgment and a single remark could make or shatter a career. But it was a pale imitation of what he felt here. It was like trying to walk against a strong gale. But An's step was unbroken, until finally her heel's tempo came to a halt. "Room 404, she said. "Let's hope it's unlocked." An tried the doorknob, and it turned freely, and she barely managed to suppress her triumphant grin. They stepped inside like the thieves they were. To honor among thieves. Neptune's water, bless these young champions. You know, I've considered an acting career in the past. I should probably see about, if I have the time, I should probably see about getting it to work out after all this farm business is done. That, Yusuke said, after the door shut, was extremely impressive. Thank you. She tucked her glasses into her blazer collar, shook her hair loose. Just like I thought, no one ever bothers someone important looking who walks around like they own the place. Nearly everyone was too busy to notice us anyway. Your acting was unexpectedly... That is to say, compared to when we first met, it was quite... Just because you start out bad at something doesn't mean you have to stay that way. I took some lessons over the summer. She winked. And you know, my acting had a pretty good track record last year, too. It's all about what people want to see. On to Kamiki's character development. She's developed her acting skills. Where did you even acquire those clothes? Oh, I just got this off the rack on the way home last night. I wasn't sure about the cut, and I was kind of worried the collar would stand out too much, but it reminded me of my thief outfit. Gave me a little confidence boost, you know? She suddenly chatted out that last word, shivering violently. Yikes. They forget to turn on the heat or something? Sorry about the stammering, An didn't really do that. It was me, acting like Porky Pig. If anything, it was even colder in here than it was outside the hospital. It's actually colder? How is it colder? Dragon Ball Z abridged shout out. Yusuke massaged his arms, tried to work the prickling chill away from his skin. The room was a soft sepia and smelled faintly of laundry detergent. Across from the door, One large window provided a clear view of the bustling city outside. The sunlight through that window intersected the bed where Seki Shimizu lay. Ann approached him, her expression grave. Pale but clean complexion, thin nose, long lashes that lay on his cheeks like smears of soot. His hair had grown during his time asleep and formed a dark halo on the pillow. He could have been called handsome at one point, but his time spent bedridden had caused his flesh to slacken and slough in a way that appeared nauseatingly unnatural, like a corpse that the undertaker had just finished dolling up. His mouth was open slightly. His chest rose and fell. His heart monitor beeped off the seconds. He looked nothing like the entity that hunted them through the Dead Sea, and yet, as she stood over him, Ann shivered again, harder. Jeez, did they seriously just forget about him in here? Feels like the AC is running full blast. It's not August anymore. Yusuke ran his fingers over the ventilator beneath the window and felt nothing. I do not think we should linger here, he said. Well, I'm not exactly planning to start a picnic with him. She turned. Yusuke? He clutched at himself, staring hard at the floor. His complexion turned cheesy and sheen with sweat. The angles, he said hoarsely. They're improper. The corners of the window, the recesses in the walls, the way the blandly appealing picture frames hung, and the setting of the floor and the tilt of the doorway whose door they'd shut. All of these things seemed normal at first, but as Ann peered at them, they all felt suddenly and subtly off. The lines gone crooked like a child's rough drawing of a room. The doorway seemed to tilt too far to both the left and the right at once. The ground beneath her feet pitched and yawed like a ship in a storm. Every beep of the heart monitor was a nail driven into her ear. And there was something else. A sensation with which she had been much too familiar with over the last several weeks. Yusuke, she said, and the syllables were too syrupy. She all but forced them out of her throat. Do you feel like you're being watched? Paranoia. He spoke it like a warning. The both of them looked at Shimizu. Here was the flashpoint of a distortion eating the entire world alive. The walls between cognition and reality were far too thin. They could almost smell the acid tang of that cold, dark water. Yusuke stepped up beside her and withdrew the card. Its bright crimson glowed in the antique photo coloration of this room. Ann took it and held it out to the body in the bed. Hello, Shimizu, she said. Recognize this? His eyes remained closed. This was absurd. Surely she'd imagined that sudden half-beat skip in the heart monitor. In unison, they began to read. Seki Shimizu, malevolent dreamer, gowler of the Dead Sea. From your tainted sleep, you have tormented this world, entrapping it within the paranoia you wrought. At once, the room's temperature plummeted. It nearly stole their breath away. For a terrifying moment, Ann almost dropped the card, but she gripped it tight enough to crease the cardboard and read on, every word an icicle cutting at their throats. Whatever your motives, we cannot allow this evil to continue. Therefore, we have decided you shall awaken from your dream and confess your crimes with your own mouth. They had to shut their eyes. The room tumbled and groaned around them, straining against the walls of the reel. Every corner and angle warped until they seemed ready to split at the seams and reveal a glimpse of dark and eyeless horrors underneath. The view outside the window had disappeared, the sun washing out the world, until all that remained was a square of searing white. That relentless mechanical beeping had been drowned out by a second harmonic underneath. A sinister rattle. The approach of chains. We shall retrieve our comrade from the fortress of your heart, and then steal your distorted desires without delay. They rose their voices, screaming in defiance against the frozen air. This we swear, as the Phantom Thieves of Hearts! And then their throats locked up. Frozen chain links constricting the skin, sealing their windpipes shut. Before them, Shimizu lay placid and peaceful as ever. Behind them was a voice, that toneless dragging rasp, clotted with inhuman hate. Then come. The chains disappeared. The temperature reverted. The room snapped back into place. They gasped for air, rubbed their unmarked but burning necks. The calling card crumpled in An's fist. She turned to Yusuke, started to say something. Then the door burst open and in charged a plump and wild-haired nurse, brandishing a stack of paperwork like a berserker's shield. What was it shouting? What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. That is to say, Yusuke's mouth flapped open and shut like a gaffed fish. But then he heard sobs behind him, loud and lusty. I'm so sorry, An sniffled, wiping her eyes. We haven't seen Seki in so long. Just the sight of him. I mean, he looks like he's already dead. She clapped her hands over her face and went on crying. The nurse blinked, relented a little. You're friends of his? We attend the same school. Yusuke felt like he had to make a contribution. You're still not supposed to be here. Visiting hours are suspended. An wiped her eyes on her sleeve. I'm sorry, I didn't know. One of the other nurses, she said we could. But I don't want to get anyone in trouble. The nurse fidgeted in place like someone trying to pull themselves loose from quicksand. Then she gestured at the door. Come on, I'll escort you out. An managed a brave smile through her tears. Thank you so much. They left. Yusuke silently noted how the tension left the nurse's posture the moment she stepped out of that room. Little wonder Shimizu hadn't been transferred out. The staff here probably spent as little time in his presence as possible. He was lucky they could tolerate that hostile atmosphere long enough to change his IV. When they reached the lobby, An murmured her gratitude and goodbyes and gave the nurse a quick hug. In her closed fist, Yusuke could still see the crimson folds of the calling card. That was some quick thinking, he said, once they were outside again. Eat your heart out, Mika. Who? What? Nothing. I was gonna go home and get changed, but now I think I'll head straight for LeBlanc. You? That was always my intention. Yes. She stood with her back to him, her untied hair blown askew in the chill wind. Something about the set of her shoulders made Yusuke hesitant to get much closer. Sorry about that. The surrounding air felt volatile, like fire damp. One spark could set off an inferno. Her fist shuddered as she clenched it around the calling card again and again. He hurts all those people, kidnapped Sakura, and now he seriously thinks he can scare us away? She turned just enough for one blue eye to burn through him. Let's go, Yusuke. Forget about just stealing hearts. The Phantom Thieves are going to war. Of course you realize this means war. Next time, guys, thank you for watching.